Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session today for the Meirc webinar using process mapping for quality improvement. A topic that's very close to my heart. As you know, I'm a quality professional that's been engaged in quality improvement for the last 25 years, and I'll definitely give you a quick brief on myself. But process mapping comes in as one of the very important and critical tools or methodologies that quality professionals are using to push for quality. So I thought that's a good idea to basically come in and maybe present this, I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes, we'll see how it goes, and then take your questions on how we can actually capitalize on process mapping to achieve the best results for excellence and improvement. So let me just quickly give you an idea of myself. So my name is Fawzi Bawab, and I'm one of the senior consultants and partners at Meirc Training and Consulting. For the last 25 years, I've been engaged with many companies, multinational companies. I used to be based in Ottawa, Canada, working with KPMG, and before that with IBM as their quality manager. I also worked with BSI, British Standard Institutions, as a certification manager for the North American practices. So I came to Dubai in 2003 and later on joined Meirc to become responsible for the portfolio of quality management and strategy. So, having quality close to my heart, I thought that, I'll share with you the best practices, some of the experiences that we have, and we could use that as a platform to get your questions and see how we can be of help to you. Now, in terms of my education, bachelor's in civil engineering, master's in industrial engineering, and currently preparing my doctorate in Lean Six Sigma at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. Topics I'm passionate about, as you would imagine, from quality management, strategic planning, the ISOs, the Six Sigma, the Lean. And as you will notice, many of the practices in quality management, including Six Sigma or Lean, will use a lot of process mapping to try to understand the processes and achieve the results. So without process mapping, I can tell you that many of the initiatives in quality management will be sort of useless. So without due delay, let me share with you the main objectives of this session. What we'll start to do is basically define a process. I know many people have many questions usually on processes. What's the difference between a process and a procedure? How do we look at the process mapping as an approach as mandated by many of the quality management systems? And what are the benefits if someone's going to come and challenge you and say, why should you waste your time and run a session or a workshop for process mapping? What's the benefit I could get? So we'll talk a little bit about the benefits and why specifically process maps are much needed in the quality management arena, and why can we use quality or process mapping in quality management to achieve better results. Once we do that, we'll engage in a sort of a discussion on types of process maps, take some examples, and then talk about something called the 7 reasons why people fail in process mapping. I'll leave you with the take-home tips and then take your questions at the end. So if you have any questions, maybe towards the end, we can basically answer these questions as we go. So I have here some kind of a poll that I'd like to run for you. So let's get that going. Please pick as many answers as you see fit. The question is about how do you define a process? How do you look at processes in terms of a definition? So let me try to do that. And I think, let me see if I can start the poll here. Okay, so you need to basically pick from the above list or the below list in this case, what would be your definition for a process? So you pick as many as you can. Is it a metric for quality? Is it the methodology on its own? Is it an illustration of flows? Is it used for improvement? You could have more than one answer, or a group of activities, procedures, which together achieve a specific goal. So I see your answers coming in, and I'll give you some time, and then we'll end voting and see the results. Yeah, I see lots of good things happening here. Okay. All results are in. Okay. I see many people, of course, picking more than one answer, which is fine. Okay, so results are out. Elections, I mean the process. Okay, all right. Okay, let's end the voting and then see the results and see whether we have some answers here. So let me share with you the results. And here we go. So the results are showing here that many of you are picked the group of activities and procedures. And indeed, if you look at the results here, 60% of you said it's basically a group of activities, which is actually the case. Because the whole aim of having a process map in an organization is to guide people to get results, to achieve a specific goal, whether opening maybe an LPO or conducting a hiring process or issuing a security permit or whatever. It is basically a group of activities now / procedures, because yes, procedures are part of processes. And there should be an end or result to get that. So I believe, yes, 60% here said that that's true, and I agree with that. Use for improvement. Yes, one of the main purposes of using process maps in quality management in many of the projects is to guide you through the identification of the bottlenecks, of the lean issues, we call them, the waste, the non-value added. So many quality professionals will start their exercise by engaging the process users by an exercise of process mapping. So indeed, I mean, that's one of the main reasons why we use process maps in quality. It is for improvement. Some people just want to know the flow. How does a flow or a transaction flow from one area to another, from one department to another? So there is a tool in process mapping that can do that for us. Now, methodology. Is it a methodology? A methodology contains more elaborate steps on how to do things. So what we call a process map, a methodology, I rarely see that. Methodology could be of something like maybe a Six Sigma or a Lean Six Sigma methodology, or a plan, do, check, act, one of the Toyota ways or Deming cycle used in quality. So maybe, I'm not sure whether we can call it a methodology on its own. Metric for quality or of quality, again, if I present you with a process map, can you really give me a score? Can you give me something? There are better ways, of course, to show how we can measure quality using certain indicators. But a process on its own, a process map on its own, will not give you the metric of quality or score that we can compare it with others. So with that in mind, let me start with some presentations here, or some slides for discussion, if you may. So here's a process definition, and as you see here, it's a measure. Again, what does it measure? Does it measure the flow, the distance, maybe the time? You can have it through something we refer to as value stream mapping, one of the techniques under Lean. We can look at the operations and processes and departments involved. Again, it can help us, and this is one of the main aims, to identify any inefficiencies, errors, non-value added. Japanese call it moda, or non-value added. And eventually, I would like to use a process map to enhance effectiveness, communication, collaboration, and innovation. So all the good stuff that people look for, we can actually achieve by a process map. Now, again, doing a process map is time consuming, I have to tell you. It is engaging in terms of having the right people in the room to do the process maps. It's not going to be perfect from this first run, so we'll tell you a little bit about our experiences and my experiences in doing process maps. Now, one of the gurus for quality, Dr. Edward Deming, Not sure if you've heard the name, but he is one of the gurus for quality management that worked with the Japanese to actually revamp their quality management system through the introduction of statistical techniques. He worked with them in the 50s and 60s, and he has something to tell you. So here we go. So he's saying a bad system will beat a good person every time. So what does that mean? A system, including the processes. If you have very good, competent people, loyal, motivated, and they're always faced with bad processes, complicated processes, what do you think the result would be? Again, if you go and ask any person that's been in that situation, you'll hear frustration. You'll hear that, we're lost. We don't know how to do the job. So the whole idea of getting a system in place and a process in place is critical to the success of any organization. So we're actually saying, focus on your processes. And this is what Deming said in the 50s and 60s in Japanese. Rather than using inspection or checking the aftermath of a process, build quality within processes. And this is what's been driving us as quality professionals, is to try to identify the process, understand it, and then try to improve it to get better results and a lower cost. So again, ISO 9001, one of the quality management system, well known worldwide, they insist as part of the requirements to actually engage in a process approach within the organization, i.e. to actually apply a system of processes. And they ask organizations to actually identify the processes, the critical core processes and support processes, and try to show the interactions. Now, the best way I've seen in my experience of audits and helping organizations to achieve this, they build process maps. Now, there are different levels of detail, but they become the roadmap, the blueprint on how they run their business, and from that, they use it for improvement. Another definition here, process approach to improvement, that comes from the ISO, where one of the cornerstones of ISO 9001, for an organization to function effectively, it has to identify and manage linked activities. This is a requirement, just taken directly from the requirements. So you need to identify the resources and how you manage them to make the transformation of inputs to an output. And whether in a service or whether in a manufacturing unit, this applies as a way to improve the output and reduce, of course, the non-value and reduce cost. ISO process approach, we basically tell organization, are you using the process approach? What does that mean? It basically tells me that, have you identified your processes? Have you identified the linkages to support processes? Who is the process owner? And what are the customer requirements that you're using to transform your inputs to outputs? Indeed, what are your inputs, whether a form, whether a raw material, whether information, and what are the outputs that will satisfy your customers? And the most important maybe question here is, how do you measure success? How do you know a process is making what it is supposed to make and meeting the customer requirements? How can you create maybe a scorecard, a dashboard, an indicator, a KPI, metrics to tell me that your process is doing fine? What do we need to measure? And that is part of the process approach that companies has to be basically engaged in. Process approach and process mapping comes in under what we call business process improvement. So defining your system, which is a combination of processes put together, a process as we defined it as activities or group of activities, including procedures that basically transform inputs and output. Core processes in an organization, it is their core business. What do they do for a living? If you're in manufacturing, what is the output? What is the product that you get paid for? if you're in service, what is the core service that you basically make, or what is the added value? Support processes could be as, HR, procurement, training. Many of these support IT, for example, many of these support services or processes can help your support processes achieve the results. Without them, the core processes will suffer. Again, another process mapping. People say, what is process mapping? Well, it is in a simple format, and this is taken from the ISO definition. It is a description of the interaction between processes of the quality management system. Now, how would you describe that? How would you do that? Well, you basically have to present it in a text. Some people do process mapping in a text. They explain a process. Well, maybe we can do a visual, and that's what people like. That's what people prefer. So if you come here and we tell you, what is a process map? Well, it is a visualization of what needs to happen or what is happening. And again, people love that because they can see it visually. They can understand the flow. They can understand the departments that are basically engaging or interacting with that process. So many people will prefer the visual process maps, and this is where we teach people on how to get that. I'm just checking here. Can everyone hear me? I think I saw a message from Mahmoud that no sound. So are we good? Are we? Yes, clear and loud. Okay, great, good to hear. Mahmoud, are you with us? Mahmoud, can you hear me? I think Mahmoud. Oh, here we go. You're good to go. Excellent. Thank you. Just wanted to check the quality of the voice. So visualization becomes, a necessity in doing process maps because people can immediately relate. They can see the whole process in front of them, and they can make changes. They can discuss with their colleagues on what needs to be done. Now, why would we use that? And here's something that picked up here. Everything that we do today is becoming sort of maybe complex sometimes, and sometimes we need some kind of models that will basically help us navigate through complex business practices of today. I bet you if you try to explain your own process to someone who just joined you in your organization, and you try to do it maybe verbally, I'm sure you look at their body language and you see that sometimes they're lost. Now take a process map and show it to them, where a visualization of the interactions of the partners that you're working with, other departments that you're basically interacting with, and they start to see the whole picture in front of them. So the necessity of doing process maps becomes very critical for different reasons. So to summarize the benefits of process maps, here we go. First of all, we can use it to simplify process to tell people what to do and how we do it. Many people would love to see a process map when they join an organization because they can understand, an IT person doing troubleshooting or doing a service, they would know exactly how to do their job if things are clear to them. We can use it for training, for learning, and of course, this is where it's key in quality management. We can use it to save money, and we can use it to identify redundancy and remove non-value added. Opportunities are usually addressed and corrected faster when the whole team sits together and do this in a session. Yes, it is time consuming. The sessions I do with companies sometimes takes a day, 2 days, depending on the complexity of the processes. And we can use it as a training program to maybe create orientation programs for new staff and give them the need or give them what they want. So, this is in terms of summarizing the benefits. Again, we're just emphasizing the note that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I can, you can look at schematics. Many people are very good with schematics. Many people are good with visualization, and they can understand that something is happening here. I call it the black box, and here is what we need to feed, and here is what we seek to get. And immediately you can see here, this is what we call the high-level process maps. Now, some people are interested to know what exactly happened here. And this is where we need a more detailed process maps. So we'll talk about maybe the different levels of process maps, because sometimes we need a very high level of detail to understand the process. Here's a very simple one. I mean, elements of a process. This is you want to start your car, you want to take a trip, get to work, or go somewhere. So what do you need? You need your car, you need your gas, you need your key, you need the driver, and then there are certain steps you have to do. You do them, and then what happens? The value added of what you did here is getting you from A to B, i.e., trip is made. Now the question is this the process? Is it done efficiently? Is it done effectively? And what type of indicators can we use to look at the measurements? Can we look at the time? Can we look at the cost? Can we look at the number of steps? There are so many things that we can look at, and we can assess. We can compare processes together. I mean, there's a faster way that we can do this process. Is there a better way? And this is what quality professionals are engaged in, i.e. Kaizen or improvement. Now, here is someone that you might know. Okay, so again, I'm just emphasizing the point. If you do not have an understanding of the process approach and the interactions and the steps, you will not be able to basically understand how things are going. And without that, your quality assessment and your improvement is going to be what? Useless. It's going to fail. And I see this in quality management. I see resistance sometimes in some of the projects in quality management where people just want to spend the time. They want to do process maps. Why? Yeah, it's time consuming. You need to bring them in. You need to organize the venue. You need to get the process users engaged. And sometimes their answer, we're too busy. We're doing work. But you want to improve work. So you need to take the time, and you need to basically engage to do that. Without that, you see failures, you see people, what we call it, the jumping into the solution without looking at the process, which basically will sometimes change the process, but not to the better, but to the worse. Understanding the process approach, as we said, it is the application of a system of processes, and this is where people say, are you using the process approach? This is what they mean. Did you identify them? Did you map them? Do you have the interaction done? In quality management, one of the cornerstones of quality management is continual improvement. Without process maps, you cannot do continual improvement, and this is where they insist with the requirement to do that. The process characteristics of doing processes, interactions with top management, human resources. So all of these items need to be identified in your processes. And as we said, the objective of doing processes is Kaizen. Kaizen is Japanese, which means change for the good. So when someone is asking you, can you please conduct a process Kaizen? Can you Kaizen the process? They basically mean, let's do the improvement. So how do we do the improvement? You tell them immediately, I need to do the process map. I need to create a baseline for what we refer to as the as is, the current situation of your process. So we'll talk about the current situation in a minute. One of the other methodologies that's being used for process improvement, it's something that we refer to as the Plan, Do, Check, Act, PDCA, originally by Short, who was one of the people who talked about improvement statistics in the 1920s, and later on was adapted by Dr. Deming. So some people know it as the Deming Cycle. And this is how we plan for the improvement. This is where we do the process mapping at the beginning. We identify the pain, the gap. And then once we identify the gap, we move to the doing, where we suggest some improvement and treatment for the process. We run the process and we check and we measure that there's improvement, and then we close the loop here by addressing any gaps or analysis and improving other similar processes. So a well-known methodology that many use, Toyota use it under the name of A3 methodology. So some slides here on the plan, do, check, act. I think you're all gonna get a link for this, so you can look at it later on. And if you have any questions, of course, we'll be ready to answer. One of the key elements why we do process analysis and mapping is this. What type of non-value added activities can you see in your processes? So if you think for a minute now of a process that you are in, what type of non-value added activities that you basically identify, and maybe your customers will identify, and they will tell you, why am I doing this? I could be doing this faster. Why do I have to sign this piece of paper? Why I have to check this again or twice or 3 times, maybe sometimes in the process? So, if you start this exercise, if you have a process map in front of you, that would be very useful, because we can identify the different types of non-value added. And as an example here, here's an example. We call it waste. So if you look at material, if you look at machine, if you look at quality, if you look at safety, if you look at management, some people challenge meetings, waste in meetings. And I'm sure many companies would have a number of meetings where they will have to challenge, why do we have so many meetings? Why do we invite so many people to the meetings? And again, waste in transactions can be identified through processes. So one of the key elements for process mapping is to identify what we refer to as the moda, or waste in Japanese. So how do we start this process? Well, in a summary, we start by selecting a process there is a need to do that. You basically go to a doctor or physician, and there is a need, there's a pain. So we teach people how to identify pain, and sometimes it's straightforward to find sick processes, because you've got complaints, you've got processes that are unable to meet their service level agreements or SLAs or KPIs. And once we see a deviation or a gap, then that process is a candidate for improvement. Key questions we ask before engaging in the process mapping. We talk about the purpose. Why are we doing it? Who's driving that process mapping exercise? Who will be using? Who is the audience? So I call them past dialogue. Past dialogue. So the first one is purpose, defining the purpose. Why are we doing it? Are we doing it for improvement or documentation? And then who will be looking at it? Who would be getting it? And who's the audience? Determining the standards for content, templates for doing the processes, and then the scope and the boundaries. This is very important, because this will help us define later on the level of detail. When I engage in process maps, we want to understand, where does it start, where does it end? Otherwise, you'll end up in a very long exercise, and you don't want to map everything in the organization. So you want to isolate the sick processes, and you want to identify the beginning and the end. Once you do that, you define the level of detail. So, do you want to do the forest view? Do you want to do the ground view? Do you want to do the tree view? You want to just get an idea? So there are different process maps for doing this. And again, this usually will depend on the audience that will be getting that process map. We want to get the information. Now, do you go and get a written text? Do you go and interview people? You go on the floor and talk to the people about the processes. So Japanese call it go to the gamba. Gamba is the floor or the ground, i.e. I see someone saying no sound. Yeah, okay. I think everyone can hear me, so we should be okay. If you have any problems, check their connection, check your maybe internet. Sometimes it might just create some issues. Okay, great. So I think maybe it's a connection issue or maybe internet just interruption. So we were talking about the past dial, and as we said, we need to gather the information. Now, again, there's a question here that we need to discuss. What type of information do we need to gather? And the more information that you need, of course, it's going to be more time consuming. So we talk about the people involved. We talk about the flow, the handshakes with the departments. We talk about the measurements. Now it might get tricky because sometimes you need to measure, you need to get what we call statistical information about the processes behavior, and this is more time consuming. And then how would you record that information? So the R is how would you record that? And of course, check if you need any other data, and then you come and you start your process map. So this is what we call preparation steps. These are questions that we basically, talked about in more detail, of course, in our sessions. And we talked about how can you ensure that when you run the process map exercise, it's going to be very effective and you will get the results that you need. You don't want to get into an exercise and you discover that you haven't scoped very well the processes. You don't have enough details. So you want to make sure that everything is in place. So we spend lots of time actually talking about the past Dairo model. Here we go. People say, so what types of process maps or mapping tools are available? We can talk about, the very simple flow charting that many people are familiar with. We can talk about spaghetti diagrams, we call them, because they actually reveal movement, they reveal the flow, and they show sometimes the excessive movement between areas or people going to do things. We can do swim lane or functional deployment where they show you departmental interaction, individual interaction. We can do something called value stream maps under lean studies where they're more thorough, they're more detailed, they have their own lingo, but we also get information and numerical information about these processes. We can use value-added MVA analysis to identify what we refer to as the 7 types of waste. So lots of these tools, and we spend time talking about each one of them. So I picked a couple of them, actually. I picked SciPoc, which is done in high-level process mapping in Six Sigma, and another tool, very nice tool called the Turtle. So we'll talk about these two tools in more detail in the next slides. And here is an example. I mean, tons of softwares right now that can do this and clean it up. Although we do encourage people to do what? To do it manually first with the group, get it done, and then you can clean it up using any of the softwares available. So to have these fancy charts and colors and shapes. So this is where you can do all of this within a software. But we do encourage first to do it manually. So as I promised, we will talk about Abdurrahman, unable. Abdurrahman, double check your connection, unless it's a problem with everyone. Abdurrahman. Okay, here. All right, seems everything's fine. So we have here a SciPoc. Now, a SciPoc is a well-known tool used in Six Sigma courses to identify the forest, the 30,000 feet of a process. SciPoc, again, stands for defining the suppliers engaged with the process, defining the inputs needed to get the process going, defining the process steps, and we usually recommend that the process steps are summarized within 6 to 8 steps, mainly describing the flow. And then what is the output? You could have more than one output, but usually, you will have one main output that is adding value or expected. And then, of course, after that, you have the customers that are getting it. So if you take this shape and you present it in a table, people use tables, diagrams, and you can do it for anything, doing an omelet cycle. And you can say, okay, what do I need? Sending my car for a service. doing any process that you're doing today, you can cycle that and you can get an idea of what happens. So I have an example here. So here is some kind of a credit risk group, and this is where credit ledger data. You have analysis. You have see monthly. What's the output? Monthly financial what forecast or reports, right? So it is monthly finance and accounting, all right? So it is under what? Under the results, right? Under the reports. And then you have who's getting it? Well, the CFOs, the controllers are getting that. So this could be like, the monthly preparation reports for, a financial report. You can do it for anything that you want. It's basically identifying, if you see here, these are all inputs. Now, if you don't have this, if this section does not send you what you need, you basically will have a delay. You will have an issue. So this is a very good, diagram, maybe to scope a process map where maybe someone is complaining about not meeting the deadlines or the SLAs for getting the output. So you want to get more details about the process. So we might take this process and then do another type of a process where we can do what? Maybe a flow chart, or maybe do something called a swim lane analysis. And I think I have a swim lane somewhere here. Okay, I'll show you this later on, but here's a swim lane. So here is the as is. We can take that process and then move into a higher level of detail to understand why do we have delays here? Why are we getting bottlenecks here? Maybe they're understaffed. Maybe they don't have the right system. Maybe their system is breaking down all the time. IT, right? We don't know. This is where we start asking the right question in such a way. So it's a very nice tool, high-level tool, used in many methodologies, as I mentioned, including Six Sigma. Another nice tool that people know as the turtle. So the turtle is basically another visualization of what are the inputs, what are the resources needed, whether it is software, whether it is infrastructure, buildings, and then we can talk about the people, qualifications, skills, and we can then talk about the policies and procedures, and then we can talk about the criteria that you use to measure. So let me show you how it goes here. So here's my process. You just write now the name. You can use it for audits. You can use it for consulting. This is where you want to get information maybe from the process users. And you start asking them about the process, listing what they have, asking them about the inputs, asking detailed questions about the types of input they have. You ask them to look at the procedures, methods, policies are here, who's doing the job, level of training, competencies, and what is the output. And then, of course, how do we measure it? What are the KPIs and information? So we have nice templates that basically, can do this, and people have to engage in doing this process. Again, process mapping is fun because you do engage many people. You get them to participate. They feel part of the discussion. They feel part of the solution. It's done through presentations. I've conducted with many clients many of these sessions. I'll share with you some pictures here. So as you can see, groups are engaged in presentation, working together here. So it's a team exercise where many companies, actual companies, banks, oil and gas, services, government, are doing this to become better in what they do through the challenging, I call it the challenging of the process. So, lots of that stuff is being done as we speak today in many organizations, and it becomes key for improvement. As we said, this is what I refer to as the swim lane, and you can see the lanes. That's why they call it the lanes. And it's now we're defining the as is. We call it the as is because this is how it is today. This is how we read it, or this is how we got it from the users when we did the exercise. The second thing we want to do after this exercise is to create something called what it should be, which basically will be the improvement from the as is to the suggested or should be. And this is where you engage the stakeholders and the management to get approvals on the new process and then changing all relevant procedures. Fun, engaging, team-based. So why do people fail when they do it? Well, here are 7 reasons why people fail in process mapping. Maybe they get into details that's too complicated and they want to do the perfect map, and you cannot do it from the first time, let's say. So they get into the details and the perfection mindset that basically get people to slow down and maybe fail in doing it. Maybe they will just read it from somewhere to discover later on that what they read is not reflected. This is not the current practice. Japanese call it go to the gamba, i.e. go to the floor, go to the people who are doing it and get confirmation that what you will do as read from the written documented procedure is what you have. Not getting people involved. You want to get people, your teams, your process users, your process owners, stakeholders involved. Sometimes you just map what you want to see and you ignore the actual process for different reasons. So that's when you want to improve it. You're not going to improve the actual process. You end up improving what you want to see. And using it just, for window dressing or for other reasons and not identifying the value added and waste steps. And this is where the core element in quality management, you're doing too little, you're doing too much, not being clear on the scope at the beginning, and failing to drive improvement from these process maps. So this might, create, dissatisfaction or frustration from the teams who were involved with it in the first place because they want to see results. Tips, take home, away or takeaways for success: engagement of your staff, support of senior management. Remember, it's time consuming and you will get their approval. Team collaborations, commitment from the staff and the management, and using a systematic approach, maybe a good facilitator who can guide the team and using the right tools and process mapping, and then of course continuous and a close follow-up of the results. So usually these are the things that will happen. Again, I mentioned at the beginning, it's a fun exercise, time consuming, yes, but the results are amazing. And I see teams getting to that level of understanding where they just stand in front of the wall and they say, I call it the aha moment, where the revelation is in and they can actually look at the process. So I think that's basically covers what I wanted to share with you today. Ready to get any questions from you and to give you any guidance or help. Again, process mapping is sometimes lengthy, and we do discuss it in our training courses and our sometimes customized interventions with the companies where they need a specific solution. So yeah, shoot questions. Okay, Mahmoud, what are the KPIs and what the benefits? Well, basically, KPI stands for key performance indicators. And the science of indicators in general is basically, health. If you think about your health, what are the key indicators that you would look at when you go and do a checkup with a physician or a doctor? What would tell you that you're doing great? Would you look at your blood pressure, your sugar level, your temperature, maybe? And probably you're gonna pick maybe a number of these indicators, and maybe you'll keep them in front of you. I don't know, maybe on your phone now. All these gadgets have all these phones all these softwares and applications. So maybe these are the indicators. So indicators will help me know whether I am on the right track, whether the processes are giving me what I want. Are there any deviations? And I would use them as a baseline for improvement as well, so I can compare the before and after. So another question, how do we set an indicator? I think, is that what you meant, right? Up there, correct? An indicator. So how do we set an indicator? Well, that's it's a very good question, because we engage in sometimes sessions just to answer that question. We have training courses. I teach sometimes a course, 5-day courses on KPIs. It's called Certificate in KPIs. And KPIs don't come from nothing. They need to be linked to what we call sometimes the areas that you want to measure. For example, if you want to measure quality, so what are the indicators for the process that you want to measure? Are we measuring cycle time? So maybe an indicator could be percentage of achievement of a cycle time within the target. Service level agreements are part of measurements that we use. There are different types of indicators. You've got lagging, leading, you've got output, input, you've got tons of different types of KPIs, which is basically when we get to the process level, we go and engage in deciding for each type of a process, what are the measurements that will tell me that this process is healthy, is doing what it is supposed to do. So very good question, and we can talk about that also in more detail. Which one is first, KPI or process mapping? Which one is, can you elaborate more? Which one is first, KPI? You mean for process mapping, or which one is first, KPI? Oh, okay. Well, process mapping, remember, it's basically a visualization of a process that maybe it's there, right? Now, many times when you do the process mapping and we sit with the process users or process owners, they do tell us that we don't have measurements. We don't measure it. So at that time, we ask them to, or we engage in that discussion to design KPIs for that specific process. So process mapping is visualization of an existing process or maybe a future process. But it's not the sequence here. We come in and we do process mapping. We discover some processes are lacking KPIs. Some of them have KPIs. So when we put a process in place, we should have a KPI with it if you talk about design of processes. Okay, when to decide? I think Salma had a question. When to decide which approach to use? When you say approach, do you mean, Salma, it's the tool? The different type of process maps. As we said, there are cycle, there are simple flow charts, there are a swim lane. Is that what? Oh, you mean the tools? Okay, I just saw that message. Yes, we talked in one of the slides, which is we refer to as the pass diagram. Remember, deciding on the purpose, correct? The audience, right? The scope and the level of detail, standards. Well, this will help me decide on the type of tool. For example, if I sit with a company, with a team, they want to do process mapping, I will ask them about the scope of the processes. I will ask them to what purpose do they want to use it. And based on this, I will decide on the type of tool. Sometimes we do start with a high level, like the cycle maybe, or the turtle, just to get a flavor of the process. And then we might engage when we get to the nuts and bolts of the process. We might need to use a simple flow chart or more of a detailed flow chart or a process. Okay, maybe a question. Can we, okay, how can we get, yes, of course, how can we get recordings of webinars? You just basically, they will be posted on our website. And if you participated in this workshop or this webinar, you will get a copy where you can download this webinar and keep it. Otherwise, I think within a week or so, it will be posted on the website and you can go there. And there are many, by the way, useful webinars on our website if you want to check in different topics as well, all free for you. So feel free to download as many as you. Can we? I have a question on KPI. Seems Abera, and I'm pronouncing it correct. Can we share specific? Can we share specific KPI for training? All right. So you want to measure training? All right, that's interesting. Training is well known for the KPIs, and we've got so many. If you think about a training process or a training department, so we can measure the, for example, the effectiveness of training. And I've seen KPIs measuring, for example, the average increase in competencies. So you might have an average competency for your staff, and you might measure that as an average if you have a competency framework, and then you basically do a calculation where you can get me that a percentage of employees basically have increased their competencies by a certain level. You can talk about the process of conducting training as achievement of a training plan, so percentage of achievement of a training plan. And I can put an indicator for, let's say, percentage of achievement of a training plan by 90%. This could be a KPI for a training department. You can see their measurement. Of course, we can measure other stuff, within the training department, specific processes as well. Okay, should process mapping by itself be taken as a project or as an ongoing exercise? Interesting question. Sometimes we're invited to do process mapping by itself for a department. Sometimes it is an ongoing exercise, especially if you have ISO, where ISO 9001, where you're required to update your processes and you need to show that someone is looking at the improvement. So it could be looked at both, but we had examples of companies engaging us as some kind of a project where they tell us, come and work with this department, conduct the process maps, get them to get some ideas, and get them to reach what we call the should be or the improved state, and they use it later on to discuss it with their management. Yes, a difference between process mapping and flow charts. Well, many people sometimes look at the simple flow charts as a tool for process mapping. Remember, process mapping, as we defined it earlier, if you remember, it's a measure, it's a flow, it's an interaction. So if I present to you a flow chart, a simple flow chart, and I tell you, can you see the interaction for that? Now, again, some people say, well, it is a description of the procedure, which is correct. So I would look at process mapping as a little bit more holistic. A simple flow chart could be a tool to show you maybe the flow of a procedure. But once you get into process mapping, you need to be a little bit more holistic in terms of what are the requirements, what are the indicators. Maybe a simple flow chart will not show you that immediately. Great, thank you. I see. Your thanks and thank you. So I guess yeah, you have a great weekend as well. Share sample for KPI for process mapping. Sample for KPI and process mapping. We have the process mapping. I had some examples on the process mapping before. If you've seen that, this could be a swim lane. This could be something here that's done. So these are all examples of process mapping. Samples of KPIs, again, yes, if you want, send us an email, I can send you, but tell me which area, because as I said, tons of KPIs in different areas. We have maybe over 400 KPIs under the HR. We have in IT over maybe 300. So, what do you want to measure? What's the process? So, let me know, and I'll write you my email in a minute, so you can send me any follow-up questions, and if you need any specific details, I'll be more than glad to send you that. So I guess I'd like to thank you all for your time, and hopefully you'll benefit from the session, and good luck. If you have any other questions, send it to me, and we'll be in touch with you, and we can send you any type of information needed. So have a great weekend, everyone, and have a lovely afternoon wherever you are. Thank you, and hope to talk to you soon.
Meirc.com